Good evening, grade 10G. Hope you guys have all been well. This video here is going to be about the nervous system. It's going to be basically a review because we would have, done this work inside class, but it's been a while. So I'll start off this lesson here with a review of the nervous system, and then we'll move on to our topics. Now, here's an overview of the lesson. After we're completely done with this lesson, it might take 1 to 2 or maybe even 3 videos. But when we're done with this lesson or these series of lessons on the nervous system, we should know the function of the nervous system. We should know the two divisions of the nervous system and their parts. We should know the 3 types of nerve cells, and we should be able to describe what a simple reflex reaction is. Now, like I said earlier, this is basically a review because we would have, talked about this topics while we were in class. So a lot of this stuff you guys would be, vaguely, I guess you might vaguely remember a lot of these things. But it's good for me to, bring this topic up and review this topic before we move on to our new topics. Now, uh, here's some tips that you guys can use that'll basically help you guys to, I guess, really benefit from these videos. I'd suggest you guys to have a folder sheet and a folder so that you can record, a very short summary or take notes, as you listen to this video. Also, you'll find that, as I go through this video, there are going to be times where I basically have a summary of what I would have talked about up to that point. Okay, so if you wanted to, that would be the time when I guess, recommend you to, just take a little bit of, uh, just make I guess, a list or a summary of what would be on those slides. Also, there would be questions at the end of every lesson, or sometimes at the end of each video. Okay, so here are the questions here that you guys should be able to answer, at the end of this video here. All right, so take a note, of these questions. Either you can write it down if you wanted to right now, and then as you listen, to the lesson, you'll be able to answer these things as you go along. Okay, so let's begin. Why is the nervous system important? Now, you might remember that, the main function of the nervous system is to help to control the activities of our body, every single activity inside our body. It also is going to help to coordinate these different activities. So, for example, here with this little animation that you see here, you see the person is walking. Walking requires, a lot of different activities to occur at the same time. Person has to balance himself. He's moving his right leg, and then he's moving his left leg, and then he's controlling, I guess, this motion as he moves. So it's almost as if the body is multitasking. Okay, so the nervous system is basically designed to help to coordinate all these different activities that's going on inside of the body. Now, some of these things might be, an external, I guess, reaction where I guess you have someone who's walking or physically doing something. But a lot of these things that the nervous system also controls is happening on the inside of our body, such as our heart beating or our lungs breathing. Okay, so the nervous system is going to control internal and external activities of our body. All right, and the reason why that is important is because the nervous system is basically going to help us to respond to our outside environment as well as, the internal environment. I'll explain more, what I mean by this, as I go along in the lesson. But with this example here, You see a person holding a candle that that has fire on it or that's lit. That the heat from that fire, after a while, if it got too close to the hand, you would feel that heat. It would cause pain. So that is an example of your body responding to the external environment, or basically uh, everything that surrounds us. Okay, as you're watching this video, you may have a number of external stimuli or things that you are experiencing or that your body is experiencing. You might be, inside a hot room right now, or you could be sweating, or you could be, walking from one place to the next. But basically, your body is, responding to its external environment. You could feel, changes in the temperature. You could hear different noises inside your environment. You could hear my voice speaking. Okay, so the nervous system is important because it's going to help us to respond to the external environment or the outside world. In addition to that, the nervous system also helps to respond to the internal environment. See if I have something showing that. Okay, so with the internal environment, this is basically all of the activities that is taking place inside of our body. Okay, for example, our body needs oxygen. Okay, this is why we have to breathe in this oxygen. All of our cells need a certain amount of oxygen. If our body feels as though, we're running low on oxygen, our nervous system is going to kick in and basically tell our lungs to breathe a little bit faster so that it'll take in more oxygen. But I'll go more in detail into that, later on inside the lesson. All right, so far, this is what we learned about why the nervous system is important. We learned that our nervous system helps us to respond to internal and external stimuli. Now, a stimuli is any detectable change that occurs inside our environment. Okay, when I say environment, I'm talking about our surroundings. If I say internal environment, then that means inside of our body. So, for example, going back to when I was talking about the external environment or our surroundings that's outside of our body, some of the stimuli that your body might be sensing, or some of the changes, that are detectable around you is temperature. Remember I said, for example, a room might be hot. Another example of an external stimuli is noise. Okay, you might be in a noisy room or you might be in a quiet room. And at the same time, too, you could still hear my voice. So that's a part of an external stimuli. Remember, a stimuli or a stimulus is any detectable change inside an environment. Okay, so if you were writing down uh, these things on a folder sheet, you could write that down as a definition of stimuli: a detectable change in the environment. That's what a stimuli is. But moving on to, the other functions of the nervous system. The nervous system also is responsible for processing information. When I say process information, that basically means that it's going to try to interpret information. It's going to try to figure out what these different uh, nerve impulses coming from different parts of the body is trying to tell the brain. Okay, so let's go back to this picture here where you see, a person holding a candle that's on fire. Now, if they bring that candle, close to their hand, even if the fire isn't that close to their hand, close enough to burn their hand, they could still feel the heat coming from that candle. So their fingers might feel warm. Okay? The reason why it's starting to feel warm is because these fingers have nerves inside of them. They have sensory nerves inside of them. Once those nerve impulses travel into the nervous system and makes its way into the brain is going to process that information. the brain is going to interpret that information as heat. And then it's going to create the warm sensation that we will feel inside our hand, okay? So the brain is basically going to create that warm sensation. That's how it's going to interpret that nerve impulse that it felt from the hand. Okay, so that's a second function of the nervous system. It's going to process information or interpret this information. Process and interpret, you could use either one. They basically mean the same thing. Another function of the nervous system is that it's going to signal an appropriate response. Okay, so when I say signal appropriate response, that just basically means that it's going to cause an appropriate response. A lot of you guys should, be familiar with this. For example, if you burn your hand with fire, you're going to pull your hand away. That is a response. That's an appropriate response. If you put your hand in the fire, your entire body won't jump. Instead, in that moment, your hand will just pull away automatically. Okay, so that's another function of the nervous system. All right, so let's talk about external and internal stimuli a little bit more. So here's an example of external stimuli. All right, in this picture here, this person is in a cold environment, so their skin is going to feel cold. This is a external stimuli because this is a detectable change in the outside environment. This cold sensation is happening outside of this person's body, and her body is responding to this cold temperature by feeling that cold sensation. Okay, so that's an example of an external stimuli. These are things that are happening inside of our environment. Okay, another example is sound. Okay, so with these external stimuli, they're basically talking about our 5 different senses. Okay, this one here is touch. If you touch the snow, it's going to feel cold. This one here is sound. We hear sound with our ears. This one here is taste. A person is tasting, some type of food. That food is a part of the external environment. This person here is reading, so they are looking at the words on this page. Those words on the page, that's also a part of the external environment. And this person here is touching a golf ball. Okay, so how we interact with our environment, our outside environment, those are going to be external stimuli. With internal stimuli, these are just basically all the different things that are taking place inside our body. I already gave you guys an example earlier where I said, remember, all of the cells inside of our body needs oxygen. Okay, so our body, different parts of our body are going to have to work together to make sure it has this balance of oxygen. For example, if our brain was to detect that, the amount of oxygen inside of our blood was too low, then it would send a nerve impulse to the lungs. Those nerves will basically instruct the lung to breathe a little bit faster. Okay, so for example, if we were exercising and we need a lot of energy, we're going to need oxygen to get that energy. Because remember, that's what respiration is. Respiration is the release of energy from food. And with respiration, you're going to need oxygen for that to happen. Okay, so if we're exercising and our body needs more oxygen, our heart is going to start beating faster so that it can pump blood around our body quicker. And also our lungs are going to start breathing faster so that it'll take in more oxygen and release more carbon dioxide. So this is an example of an internal stimuli. We have a lot of these different internal stimuli happening inside of our body. Okay, so here's a summary. Here's a good description or definition or a statement that explains why the nervous system is important. This is what the nervous system does. The nervous system connects us to the outside environment, and it helps our body to adjust to changes in the external or the internal environment. Okay, so you don't have to necessarily write that down, but you know it's helpful to, I guess, remember it this way. This statement here basically explains everything that the nervous system does. And remember, the nervous system is going to have three roles. Firstly, the nervous system responds to external and internal stimuli. Okay, so this animation here is just basically showing, you know, our nervous system responding to external and in this case, external stimuli. For example, the eyes, remember the eyes see things, and our ears hear things. Okay, so once these sense organs detect stimuli or external stimuli, it's going to create a nerve impulse that's going to travel along these nerves, and they're going to go to the brain. Now, after this nerve impulse reaches the brain, remember that, you know, different parts of the brain have different jobs. Okay, so each part of the brain is going to have a specific function to do. So once these nerve impulses goes to, you know, these different regions of the brain is going to interpret these stimuli, and then uh, you know, create a sensation of sight, or it's going to use the information that the eyes sent to the brain and interpret that and process that to create a clear vision. And the same thing with the ears. It's going to take those different sounds and try to process that information. So for example, you know, if someone was talking to you, it's going to process that sound, and it's going to help you to, you know, understand the words that that person is saying. So I'll play this video one more time. Here you have, you know, the nerve impulses traveling to the brain. They're both going to different regions of the brain, and the brain is going to interpret or process this information. Remember, this is one of the things that the brain does. It's going to respond to external and internal stimuli, and it's going to process this information. Okay, so this is why, you know, we often call the brain the command center, because once these nerve impulses go to the brain, different parts of the brain is going to process this information. Okay, so that is the second role of the nervous system. It is going to interpret or process information. So the nervous system is going to collect stimuli or information from the internal and external environment and send it to the brain for processing. Okay, so that's what this video here basically showed. It showed the brain receiving stimuli or nerve impulses from different parts of the body, and it's going to process this information. Different parts of the brain is going to process this information as it comes to it, as these nerve impulses travel to it through the nervous system. Okay, so that's the second role of the nervous system. And last but not least, uh, the nervous system is going to cause an appropriate response. So the brain is basically going to help to control, you know, different parts of the body by sending it instructions. Okay, so whenever we have to run, for example, this information is being sent to our limbs or our legs and our arms to basically help us to run. All right, so here's a summary of everything I said so far. This is a good definition of what the nervous system does. So if you were to take the BJC, for example, this might be a 1-point question, and here would be a good response. The nervous system detects stimuli, it processes it, and then responds to it. Okay, so that's basically a summary of everything we learned up to this point right here.